Welcome to Washington Today for Monday, May 19th, 2025. I'm Gary Starkoff. Thank you for joining us. House Speaker Mike Johnson says the Republicans' federal budget resolution still has, quote, a lot of hurdles left following its passage out of the House Budget Committee late last night. Fox News digital reporter Liz Elkind reported this morning that Speaker Johnson said on a conference call, members are facing, quote, the most important 48 hours ahead of us that we will ever have in our lives. Meanwhile, CNN is reporting that President Trump will make a personal pitch to House Republicans to pass the bill at a meeting at the Capitol tomorrow. President Trump also announced that Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and an end to the war. That statement followed what the president said was a 2-hour phone call with Russian President Vladimir Putin. The president added that the tone and spirit of the conversation were excellent and that he has talked about it to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy and European leaders. And early this morning, former President Biden posted a picture on social media of himself along with former First Lady Jill Biden that read, "Cancer touches us all. Like so many of you, Jill and I have learned that we are strongest in the broken places. Thank you for lifting us up with love and support." Political allies and rivals sent well wishes and tributes to the former president. President Trump said that he and First Lady Melania Trump extend their warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast, successful recovery. Former Vice President Kamala Harris said that Joe Biden, quote, will face this challenge with the same strength, resilience, and optimism that has always defined his life and leadership. The meeting between President Trump and House Republicans at the Capitol is reportedly scheduled for 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. In the meantime, Fox News' Chad Pergram quoting House Speaker Mike Johnson summing up the state of the bill like this. We have multiple caucuses and multiple subgroups who have made requests and suggestions as we work towards a manager's amendment, cleanup amendment that will go through rules. And so none of that has been ultimately and finally decided because, as everyone knows around here, we have to build consensus around all those ideas. A reference to manager's amendment that is the bill's vehicles in the Rules Committee, and that's where the bill needs to go before it hits the House floor. And right now, the Rules Committee hearing is scheduled for 1 a.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday. Jake Sherman of Punchbowl News reporting that the issues Republicans are still trying to find consensus on include Medicaid work and eligibility requirements and tax reform, specifically changes to the state and local tax deductions. And Politico's Meredith Lee Hill reporting Speaker Johnson is meeting with a group of Republicans about those deductions at 9 p.m. tonight. Democrats are also talking about reconciliation. Here's House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries.
House Republicans are trying to jam this reckless and extreme budget down the throats of the American people and hide what's in it, which is why, in an extraordinary way, they are holding a Rules Committee hearing to advance the bill at 1 a.m. in the morning. If this legislation is designed to make life better for the American people, can someone explain to me why they would hold a hearing to advance the bill at 1 a.m. in the morning? Because the Republicans know that their efforts to take away health care from millions of Americans is deeply unpopular. Republicans know that the effort to enact the largest cut to nutritional assistance in American history, which will literally take food from the mouths of children, veterans, and seniors, is deeply unpopular. Republicans know they're providing their billionaire donors with a massive tax break for people like Elon Musk, and at the same time, exploding the deficit by trillions of dollars is deeply unpopular. That's why Republicans are going to try to advance this bill in the dead of night at 1 a.m. in the morning. Trump and House Republicans can run away from their extreme budget proposal. We will never let them hide.
Leader Jeffries was also asked if he had talked to former President Biden about his cancer diagnosis and also Republicans' ideas on Medicaid work and eligibility requirements.
I have not had the opportunity to speak to President Biden subsequent to the news of the diagnosis becoming public yesterday. I do expect at some point in time I will speak directly to him to more directly communicate, my thoughts and prayers and that of the House Democratic Caucus. In terms of the Republican obsession with taking away health care from the American people, this is something that they've been trying to do for decades. And the so-called Freedom Caucus are making demands to push the bill into a more extreme direction. So the question is going to be, will the so-called moderate Republicans who have publicly claimed that they do not support efforts to end Medicaid as we know it and take away health care from the American people, will they push back against this extreme MAGA Republican effort to make the budget even more damaging to the health, safety, and well-being of the American people? We have warned from the very beginning that House Republicans are actually determined to end Medicaid as we know it. And we continue to receive proof point after proof point after proof point. And now the fact that the budget has been advanced to this stage is further evidence that despite all the claims that Democrats were not being level about what the Republicans' intentions are, the bill as it's currently written would enact the largest cut to Medicaid in American history. That's the bill as it's currently written. And Republicans are apparently planning to make it even more extreme. The one thing I want to know is Donald Trump promised to veto any bill that actually would take away Medicaid benefits from the American people. If that, in fact, is the case, is he planning on saying to House Republicans tomorrow morning that he's going to veto the bill as it's currently written? Or was he once again lying to the American people?
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries speaking to reporters at the Capitol. On the House floor, members are working on several veterans benefits and funding bills ahead of the Memorial Day holiday. One of the measures requires the Government Accountability Office to complete a review on the causes of the VA's budget shortfall within the last 2 years. Another bill requires all VA employees who process and decide military sexual trauma claims to complete annual sensitivity training. You can see all of our House coverage on C-SPAN and cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. From Barron's.com, the crypto industry appears poised to grab its first major legislative victory as Congress moves closer to passing a bill to regulate stablecoins. The bill is the so-called Genius Act. It would require stablecoins, whose value is typically pegged to the dollar, to hold reserves of liquid safe assets like treasury bills. Stablecoin users would also have to follow anti-money laundering and terrorism finance rules. That from Barron's.com. Well, Senate Republican leader John Thune talked about the bill on the floor earlier today.
The use of cryptocurrency has exploded from the margins to the mainstream, and stablecoins have emerged as a key part of the crypto ecosystem. They offer the speed and security of the blockchain with the stability and usability of the dollar bill, and they provide a business and consumer-friendly way to make payments. But stablecoin issuers and users face challenges. In the United States, stablecoins have operated in a legal gray zone. There are no clear rules of the road to follow. And between that and the Biden administration's targeting crypto companies with numerous lawsuits, many U.S.-based crypto companies have contemplated moving overseas. Not something we want to see if we want the United States to remain at the forefront of financial innovation. Fortunately, the Genius Act addresses these problems by providing a clear regulatory framework for stablecoins, a framework that will protect consumers and our national security while helping to keep the United States at the forefront of financial innovation. The bill will also create demand for the U.S. dollar and U.S. treasuries, a good thing for both our national security and our fiscal house. So this is an important bill, Mr. President, and I'm glad that it looks like we are finally going to be able to take it up. And I hope that in the future, we will be able to take up bipartisan legislation without these unnecessary delays. I want to again thank my colleagues from both parties for their work on this bill. Senators Hagerty, Lummis, and Tim Scott have worked tirelessly with Senators Gillibrand and also Brooks and their members. And they all deserve a ton of credit for listening to their respective sides of the aisle. So, Mr. President, I look forward to beginning the floor debate later today.
And today's procedural vote comes after a failed vote back on May 8th. And while we're still waiting for House passage of the Republicans' budget bill, Senate Democrats are talking about it. Here's Assistant Democratic Leader Dick Durbin.
Medicaid insures 1 in 4 people in my home state of Illinois. 1 out of 4. 3.4 million people on Medicaid, including 1.5 million children. How important is it? Medicaid is a program, an insurance program, covers nearly half of all births in our state. 2/3 of nursing home residents receive Medicaid assistance. That's your mom, your dad, your grandparents. And the majority of patients with mental health counseling count on Medicaid. The majority of the money for mental health counseling comes from that program. It's a lifeline for children's hospitals. It's a lifeline for rural hospitals. Knowing how unpopular it is to deprive America of health care, for months the Republicans have said Democrats have got it all wrong. We're not cutting Medicaid benefits. We're simply focusing on waste, fraud, and abuse. Now, if there's a program that's wasteful or fraudulent, put me in line to do something about it. I don't want to see any taxpayers' money wasted. But that's not what was happening here. And I'm afraid my colleagues on the other side of the aisle know it. With their plans, Republicans are taking a chainsaw to our health care system and ripping health insurance away. At the end of the day, their reconciliation proposal will remove Medicaid insurance for 14 million Americans. Mr. President, if you've ever lived in a circumstance where you had no health insurance, it's a sobering, unforgettable experience. I've been there. A sick child and no health insurance. It's something you'll never forget.
Assistant Senate Democratic Leader Dick Durbin speaking on the floor. Now, Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer also spoke on the floor. He talked about former President Biden's cancer diagnosis.
Mr. President, today, our thoughts and prayers are with President Biden and his entire family after his cancer diagnosis this weekend. If there's one thing we all know about President Biden, it's that he's a fighter. All his life, he's faced adversity and tragedy, the worst kind. And each time his response has been the same. He's faced it with grace, with courage, and with the kind of resilience that only can come from God. This is no different. I know President Biden will face this hardship with everything he's got. So today, the entire Senate wishes Joe Biden our very best. We will pray for him, we will root for him, and we know he will bounce back, just as he's done his whole life.
Senator Schumer also said he plans to introduce a bill to prevent taxpayer funding from being used to retrofit a foreign-owned plane for presidential use.
Now, on the Qatar plane and the Middle East. Last week, Donald Trump concluded a visit to the Middle East that was a smashing success for his own bottom line, but a dubious outcome for America's economic and security interest. First, on the Qatari plane. Last week, Donald Trump confirmed that he would accept a $400 million luxury Boeing 747 plane offered by Qatar to use as Air Force One, the largest bribe to an American president in modern history. So today, I am introducing the Presidential Airlift Security Act, prohibiting the use of any foreign plane to be utilized as Air Force One. Senate Republicans, who say they're troubled by this Qatari gift, should join me in supporting this very common sense legislation. It should not take an act of Congress to stop the President of the United States from accepting the largest foreign bribe in modern history. But we're dealing with a president who has shown he's perfectly willing to sell out the American people and the presidency to fill his own pockets. Specifically, my legislation would prohibit even a single taxpayer dollar from being used by the Department of Defense to procure, modify, or retrofit any foreign aircraft to be used in transporting a U.S. president. For one, overhauling a foreign luxury plane to serve as Air Force One would cost billions of taxpayer dollars. The refurbishing alone would cost more than the value of the plane itself. And it would take years. It's a senseless waste of taxpayer resources. Using a foreign plane as Air Force One would also bring unimaginable national security risks. National security experts from one end of the country to the other agree. No matter how many modifications are made, or how much is spent, or how intensely it's retrofitted, there will never be 100% confidence that the plane is secure.
Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer on the floor earlier today. Now, also on the Senate floor, members are working on President Trump's nomination of Charles Kushner to serve as U.S. ambassador to France and Monaco. Charles Kushner is the father of the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner. More now on the phone call between President Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin. As we said, President Trump posting on social media, quote, Russia and Ukraine will immediately start negotiations toward a ceasefire and, more importantly, an end to the war. The conditions for that will be negotiated between the two parties, as it can only be, because they know details of a negotiation that nobody else would be aware of. Late this afternoon, he took questions about the phone call in the Oval Office.
Mr. President, on Ukraine and on your call today that you had with President Putin, you said last week that you thought nothing was going to happen, no advances would be made until you and Putin got together. Do you still feel that way?
I think something's going to happen. It's a very big egos involved, I tell you. Big egos involved. But I think something's going to happen. And if it doesn't, I'd just back away and they're going to have to keep going. Again, this was a European situation. It should have remained a European situation. It should have remained, but we have, because the past administration felt very strongly that we should be involved, that we got involved much more than Europe did in terms of the money and all of the things that we gave. We gave a massive amounts, I think record-setting amounts given to a foreign. There's never been anything like this, both weaponry and money. And Europe gave a lot also, but they didn't give anywhere near what we gave. We gave probably almost 3 times the amount, and it's just a shame. The whole thing is a shame.
Did you ask President Putin
the level of death is just a shame. Yeah.
Did you ask President Putin to meet with you?
About what?
About Ukraine.
Of course I did. I talked to him about it. I said, when are we going to end this, Vladimir? I've known him for a long time now. I said, when are we going to end this bloodshed, this bloodbath? It's a bloodbath. And I do believe he wants to end it. You know, when I made the call, I told the people last night, I spoke to the heads of the different countries, Germany and Finland, we had Italy, as you know, UK was on the line today, and a couple of others, and then they were in turn calling everyone. Ursula was there from the European Union. She was terrific. And we spoke for a long time about it, and they got a problem. It's a big, big problem. It's a terrible war. It's very hard to extradite themselves away from what's taking place over there. The amount of anger, the amount of hate, and the amount of death. It's very hard, very tough situation. But I said to him, we got to get going. And I did say also, if I thought that you couldn't do it, I'd step away, because what are you going to do? We don't have boots on the ground. We wouldn't have boots on the ground. But we do have a big stake. And the financial amount that was put up is just crazy. It's crazy. This isn't for us. This is for somebody else. The amount of money that we put up is record-setting. There's never been anything like this. And that includes weapons. Never been anything like this.
Today's call marks the third known time President Trump and President Putin have spoken since the inauguration. After hearing about the call, President Zelenskyy called for more sanctions on Russian banking and energy sectors. And CNN reporting that President Zelenskyy said Ukraine had made its principles clear for an agreement. They include a full ceasefire without any conditions or preconditions, a prisoner exchange, and the return of Ukrainian children who were forcibly taken to Russia. And from Politico, the Supreme Court has granted an emergency appeal to the Trump administration to immediately end the temporary protected status that had allowed roughly 350,000 Venezuelans living in the U.S. to receive work permits and temporarily avoid deportation. Politico writing that under that program, the Homeland Security Secretary could allow immigrants from countries that are facing humanitarian crises to remain in the U.S. and work legally. The Biden administration twice used the TPS status to offer those protections to an estimated 600,000 Venezuelan immigrants. The Trump administration reversed that policy in January. You're listening to Washington Today.
Ernest Cuneo played Ivy League football at Columbia University and was in the old Brooklyn Dodgers NFL franchise before becoming a City Hall lawyer and a brain trust aide to President Franklin Roosevelt. While on the payroll of national radio columnist Walter Winchell, Cuneo mingled with the famous and powerful. But his status as a spy remained a secret, hiding in plain sight. All of this is the way Hanover Square Press introduces readers to Thomas Mayer's book, The Invisible Spy. Mayer, a graduate of Fordham and Columbia, is an author and a television producer.
Author Thomas Mayer with his book The Invisible Spy, Churchill's Rockefeller Center spy ring, and America's first secret agent of World War II, on this episode of Book Notes Plus with our host, Brian Lamb. Book Notes Plus is available wherever you get your podcasts and on the C-SPAN Now app.
Welcome back to Washington Today. Reaction continues to the news of former President Biden's prostate cancer diagnosis. He announced yesterday that he has been diagnosed with an aggressive form of the disease and that it has spread to his bones. On social media, former Vice President Kamala Harris said that she and former Second Gentleman Doug Emhoff, quote, are keeping him, Dr. Biden, and their entire family in our hearts and prayers during this time. Joe is a fighter, and I know he will face this challenge with the same strength, resilience, and optimism that have always defined his life and leadership. We are hopeful for a full and speedy recovery. Former President Obama posting, quote, Michelle and I are thinking of the entire Biden family. Nobody has done more to find breakthrough treatments for cancer in all its forms than Joe, and I'm certain he will fight this challenge with his trademark resolve and grace. We pray for a fast and full recovery. President Trump said, quote, Melania and I are saddened to hear about Joe Biden's recent medical diagnosis. We extend our warmest and best wishes to Jill and the family, and we wish Joe a fast and successful recovery. Here's what the president said this afternoon about it in the Oval Office.
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago. Because to get to stage 9, that's a long time. I just had my physical. You saw that. You saw the results of that particular test. I think that test is standard to pretty much anybody getting a physical, good physical. We had the doctors at the White House and over at Walter Reed, which is a fantastic hospital. I did a very complete physical, including cognitive tests. I'm proud to announce I aced it. I got them all right. Are you proud of me? Yes. Your husband would be proud of me for getting them all right. It's a little risk. If I didn't get them all right, these people would be after me. It would be not a good situation. But I think, frankly, anybody running for president should take a cognitive test. They say it's unconstitutional, but I would say in that particular case, having a cognitive test wouldn't be so bad. But when you take tests, medical, as a male, that test is very standard. I don't know if it's given to everybody, but it's given just about. And it takes a long time to get to that situation. Now, I think to get to a stage 9, I think that if you take a look, it's the same doctor that said that Joe was cognitively fine. There was nothing wrong with him. Well, he said, if it's the same doctor, he said there was nothing wrong there. And that's being proven to be a sad situation. And the auto pen is becoming a very big deal. The auto pen is becoming a big deal because it seems like that maybe was the president who ever operated the auto pen. But when they say that that was not good, they also, you have to look and you have to say that the test was not so good either. In other words, there are things going on that the public wasn't informed, and I think somebody's going to have to speak to his doctor. If it's the same, or even if it's two separate doctors, why wasn't the cognitive ability, why wasn't that discussed? And I think the doctor said he's just fine, and it's turned out that's not so. It's very dangerous. Look, this is no longer politically correct. This is dangerous for our country. Look at the mess we're in. You're talking about all these questions on Ukraine and Russia. That would have never happened. As an example of our president, would have never happened. The other thing is you have to say, why did it take so long? I mean, when this takes a long time. It could take years to get to this level of danger. So it's a very, very sad situation, and I feel very badly about it. And I think people should try and find out what happened, because I'll tell you, I don't know if it had anything to do with the hospital. Walter Reed is really good. They're some of the best doctors I've ever seen. I don't even know if they were involved, but a doctor was involved in each case. Maybe it was the same doctor, and somebody is not telling the facts. It's a big problem.
North Carolina Representative and Republican Greg Murphy, who has worked as a urologist for more than 30 years, posted extensively about former President Biden's diagnosis, saying in part, quote, "Medical treatment for this disease has come a long way during my career. My prayers are with him and his family." He added, quote, "While definitely agree that Biden's declining mental acuity was covered up, it is medically reckless to assume his prostate cancer was as well. I have treated prostate cancer patients for 30 plus years. Let's get the politics out of medicine." That from North Carolina Republican Greg Murphy, who is also a urologist. Prostate cancer experts told the New York Times that once the cancer spreads to the bones, it cannot be cured. But a Duke University expert says it's possible to live many years with it. You can see the former president's entire statement from yesterday at cspan.org. According to the American Public Transit Association, U.S. public transit ridership reached 85% of pre-pandemic levels in 2023. More than 34 million trips are taken each weekday on transit, and it employs more than 430,000 people. Public transit was the topic at an event here in Washington today. One of the speakers, House Transportation Committee ranking member Rick Larson.
The BIL is delivering for the United States. Thanks to the BIL, America is building. Funding from the infrastructure law has supported nearly 90,000 new transportation projects in every congressional district. Translates into 700,000 jobs in the transportation sector. Translates into nearly $600 in annual savings for American families, according to civil engineers. The building boom, spurred by investments in the BIL, pushed unemployment down to 4% as of January. In short, infrastructure equals jobs. Infrastructure connects people to the community. It provides people connections to the jobs and the jobs around them. Robust investment gives people the freedom to choose how they want to get around. And the BIL made it easier than ever for communities to invest in all modes of travel for to reflect the needs of the people that that communities represent. It made the single largest federal investment in transit in the nation's history through this law. The BIL invests more than $100 billion to support transit in communities of all sizes, expanding the reach of transit service, modernizing buses and rail cars. Some investments were for emerging technologies, like the funding for low and no emission ferries, important in my district and my state. Other investments were for important priorities other investments were for important priorities newly eligible for dedicated funding, like the All Stations Accessibility Program, or ASAP, to make transit stations ADA accessible. The BIL also made the single largest investment in passenger rail since the founding of Amtrak over 50 years ago, enabling communities to pursue more and better rail service, ensuring safer, more convenient, and more accessible travel by rail.
Also speaking at the event, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy.
So I think it's important that we actually get back to basics. The basics of improving security, deterring crime, stopping fare evasion. By the way, everybody wants more money, right? You all need more money. I think the easiest and fastest way to get more money in your pockets is to stop fare evasion. Let's have people pay their fair share when they ride. Easy one. Some tens of billions of dollars are lost because of those who are fare evaders. I would just note that I had a chance to meet with WMATA here in DC, And I think, again, I don't know that WMATA's perfect, but WMATA's taken steps to go, listen, if you're a repeat offender, where's WMATA? Right there, right in front. Great. They're sitting right in front of me. You could have been in the back corner. But they're trying to take people out of the system that are repeat offenders. Good on you for doing that. Putting more security on your system. Thank you for doing that. In LA, they hired their first transit police chief into the system. Again, steps that are driving safety and security, I think, make so much sense.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, before him, House Transportation Committee Ranking Member Rick Larson, speaking at a legislative policy conference hosted by the American Public Transportation Association. You can see all of their comments at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. This afternoon, President Trump signed the Take It Down Act in a White House Rose Garden ceremony. The bipartisan legislation aims to ban non-consensual online publication of sexually explicit images and videos that are both authentic and computer-generated, so-called revenge porn. First Lady Melania Trump spoke at the event about the bill.
This legislation is a powerful step forward in our efforts to ensure that every American, especially young people, can feel better protected from their image or identity being abused through non-consensual or intimate imagery of I and CII. Artificial intelligence and social media are the digital candy for the next generation. Sweet, addictive, and engineered to have an impact on the cognitive development of our children. But unlike sugar, these new technologies can be weaponized, shape beliefs, and sadly affect emotions and even be deadly. Over the past few months, I have met with brave survivors, deeply loving families, and caring advocates who know firsthand the emotional and psychological toll of NCII and deepfake abuse.
You can see all of today's event from the White House Rose Garden at cspan.org and the free C-SPAN Now mobile app. Finally, it is commencement season, and on Saturday, former vice presidential candidate and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz spoke at the University of Minnesota Law School graduation. The Democrat called lawyers the first and last line of defense on the rule of law. He also talked about the Boeing jet the Qatari royal family has offered to President Trump.
I don't know if you heard it. The president is getting this. I'm a little obsessive about things that really irritate the crap out of me and this type of stuff. Because this palace in the sky is getting from the Qatari government, which he gets to keep for himself when he's done. Let's be very clear. It's a flying bribe. Blatantly unconstitutional. Even worse, this whole deal was signed off on by the Attorney General of the United States. Ostensibly our nation's top lawyer. Famously an independent job. But now, the Attorney General Pam Bondi is acting as the president's personal attorney. And weirdly enough, coincidentally enough, she happens to be a lobbyist for the government of Qatar. This is what the crumbling of rule of law looks like in real time. And it's exactly what the founders of this nation feared. A tyrant abusing power to persecute scapegoats and enemies.
Minnesota Governor, former Democratic vice presidential candidate Tim Walz, speaking at the University of Minnesota Law School. We will be covering some of this year's commencement speeches from around the country here on the C-SPAN networks. You can see our schedule and see speeches from years past at cspan.org and the C-SPAN Now mobile app. That's also where you can find this program as a podcast. You can also find it on YouTube. Just search Washington Today. And for more on the stories that are shaping Washington every day, get our daily email word for word. Just go to cspan.org/connect to subscribe. I'm Gary Sterkoff. Thanks a lot for listening today to Washington Today.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum inviting you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy. From Washington and across the country, Coming up Tuesday morning, Missouri Republican Congressman Bob Onder discusses the GOP budget, tariffs, aviation security, and congressional news of the day. Then Grover Norquist with Americans for Tax Reform on the Republican budget, tax policy, and President Trump's economic and tariff policies. And Dr. Georges Benjamin of the American Public Health Association talks about recent actions by the Trump administration that directly affect public health efforts. Also, California Democratic Congressman Brad Sherman, a member of the Financial Services and Foreign Affairs Committees, discusses the GOP budget and the president's stance on Ukraine and Middle East policy. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Tuesday morning on C-SPAN. C-SPAN Now, our free mobile video app, or online at cspan.org.